Any announcements? Oh yeah, since we have a presentation today, let's keep our updates to a really brief timeline, please. Thank you. Minutes? Any additional corrections or changes to the minutes? Someone motion?
I'll move to accept the minutes from November.
Thanks, Dan. Second? Anyone? Can I second it?
Evan did.
Evan. Oh, thanks, Evan. All in favor? Any opposed? Cool. Okay. Presentation from Tony. Welcome, Tony.
Hello.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Hello, everyone. You'll let me know if folks can't hear me online, Michelle.
Everybody good? Good.
Okay.
Let me know
No
if
yelling
this-
means good, I think. So.
Yeah, we got a bunch of thumbs up, so I think we're all set.
Okay, fantastic.
You can see.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So, as you all know, the Cayuga Lake TMDL has been finalized and accepted and approved by the EPA, which marks the end of that chapter of Cayuga Lake. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the document itself, what it says, just to continue to clarify what's in there, what it means. Definitely have some time for questions in the end. I might go a little long, so if I start to really kind of drone on, just shuffle me along. But I guess if something is really unclear about a slide that I'm presenting, chime in. Otherwise, general questions, if we could hold those to the end, that would be great. So, yeah, so it's approved, which is great. On a personal note, I started working for the Upstate Freshwater Institute in 2000, and in 2001 started collecting data on the southern end of Cayuga Lake. Some of you may have seen the picture of me, baby-faced out of college, collecting water samples on the southern end. So it's been a very long and interesting journey to go from technician to model development to working for the DEC and implementing some of the recommendations of the TMDL. So what is a TMDL? TMDL is an acronym for Total Maximum Daily Load, which you all know or may know. TMDLs need to be developed, and EPA must approve them if a water body or a segment of a water body, a little bit of a nuance, but important, is impaired for any pollutant. Okay, and impaired is the regulatory term referring to waters that don't meet water quality standards and don't support their best uses. So that's the regulatory use of the term impaired. It's required by Section 303D of the Clean Water Act. It requires the usual suite of data collection, monitoring, modeling to understand how the water body can best meet its water quality standards and uses. It doesn't have to have an implementation plan. It usually has an implementation section, and they can be developed to also protect water body or water body segments. So if you think about Cayuga Lake TMDL, the southern end was a restorative TMDL because that was listed as impaired. We included the entire watershed of the lake to be protective of the rest of the lake and to provide additional benefits for people wanting to do water quality improvement work in the entire watershed, not just the southern end. So that was a very intentional decision that we had to make.
Sorry, where does the southern end start?
Southern end starts at the Cayuga Lake Inlet in Ithaca and ends just about in Lansing. So it's
Myers Point.
Myers Point, a little south of that, I think. Okay. Yeah, so it's in that neck of the woods. I think there's a map later on, but we'll get. Okay, and all of this is determined by a methodology that's published and approved by EPA called the CALM is the acronym. Probably intentional because it sounds nice. But, anyways, and all that's available online to see how those pieces interact to generate the product that you've seen in the TMDL. Okay? Okay, one more.
Oops.
The TMDL is online. New York State DEC Clean Water Planning page has all of our approved 9 element plans, TMDLs, HABs action plans, et cetera. So if you navigate to there, the TMDL for phosphorus in Cayuga Lake is there, and all of the appendices that made up the complete package of the document. So they're all there for everyone to see, and they provide links here and there to other reports and other data, et cetera, that have been used to kind of build the Cayuga Lake story. Okay, Michelle? So very quickly, how is it calculated? Data from lakes and streams were collected. Phosphorus inputs to the lake from different sources were estimated either directly through monitoring or modeling through a watershed model, very similar. This group has seen a bunch of those. A lake model was developed and calibrated using data from Cayuga Lake across the entirety of the length of the lake, and the model was accurately simulated for 16-year period to kind of show that we could run it over a range of hydrological and meteorological conditions and still be satisfied with how well the lake performed. And the highlighted box here, section 2 of the TMDL, appendix B, C, and D, have the different parts that went into its testing and calibration and use. Okay, so once it was set up and calibrated, we were able to use different scenarios using the model until the TMDL targets were reached. So essentially, you take a base case of loading with the water quality in the lake being something, and then you iteratively, mathematically reduce the phosphorus inputs until you're satisfied that the water quality standards are being met. That's the TMDL. That's the load reductions that we got and needed to meet the in-water body targets. Does that make sense? Everyone's happy with that? The point sources for such a case are assumed at their permit limits. That has to be done because a point source legally can operate at their design flow and their permitted effluent limit. Most don't. Most operate well under what they're designed or can do legally through their permit. But a total maximum daily load has to assume that the maximum amount of load is impacting the lake. So that might be a point of confusion. I think we cleared up in the responsiveness summary. Anyway, so the TMDL is the phosphorus load at which the targets were reached. And in the TMDL, if the targets are reached, it assumes water quality standards are being met and attained. Okay. So Cayugas was where the southern end initially. It was listed as impaired for phosphorus in 2002. Because the phosphorus in the southern end exceeded the guidance value New York State has for the narrative standard at 20 micrograms per liter on a summer average. So that's what triggered the listing on the 303D list. That's what triggered the need for a TMDL. Like I said, we use the whole watershed approach. What the TMDL then does, it defines chlorophyll A targets. And I know that was a point of confusion in the public review. We're going to get more to that later. That the TMDL, the load reductions have to hit in order for us to be convinced we're going to hit standards in the lake. Okay? And it recommends phosphorus reductions to achieve the TMDL and water quality standards from point and non-source reductions. And from the TMDL, as with a lot of other watersheds in the state, non-point source areas were the majority of the TP load to the lake. Okay, so what were the targets? So why did we shift to chlorophyll? A lot of questions came through, like why are we worried about chlorophyll in the lake and not phosphorus exactly, right? So chlorophyll is a measure of lake response to phosphorus when it's limited, which it is in Cayuga Lake. It's a calculation you can do to see which nutrient form or which nutrient type is the one kind of controlling or regulating algal growth. We shifted away from phosphorus directly to chlorophyll to be more protective of disinfection byproduct production in source water lakes and segments, which Cayuga Lake is for 3 of the segments. Okay, the use of chlorophyll A targets and TMDLs for nutrients like phosphorus has been approved by EPA, and there have been several in New York State, so we were following that same model for Cayuga to be very protective of all uses. Reducing phosphorus will result in lower chlorophyll A in Cayuga, as demonstrated in sections 2, B, and C, and then the scenarios are, again, in Appendix D. So we were able to demonstrate that mathematically in the model. We called for a 30% reduction in total phosphorus loading to achieve the TMDL targets in most years. We're going to get to those in a minute, but something to keep in mind that I'll make sure to try to highlight is the phosphorus levels associated with the chlorophyll targets we're hitting are less than the 20, are less than the guidance value, and in some cases a lot less. So it's being overly protective for all uses. Okay. Appendix A has more on why and how the chlorophyll targets were derived for the different segments. The foundational work was a paper done by Callanan and others, including Department of Health in 2013, where they looked at total phosphorus and chlorophyll and disinfection byproduct production across a whole suite of lakes in New York State, including, I think, all of the Finger Lakes. I'm almost positive that's true, but it definitely included Cayuga Lake in that analysis. So very good data-based approach to kind of get to those chlorophyll targets. That schematic just kind of shows how all the pieces interact from watershed inputs to chlorophyll to disinfection byproducts and source water. Okay. Okay, so what are the targets? So Cayuga Lake has 4 regulatory segments. It with Seneca are the only Finger Lakes that have more than one. These are lines of demarcation drawn in the past. I'm not exactly sure why or how they got drawn, but they're there, and we're kind of stuck trying to regulate to those classifications. So there's a northern end, a main lake mid-north, main lake mid-south, and then the Cayuga Lake southern end you can kind of see on the map here, but in the document it kind of blows it up so you can kind of see where those lines are. The uses and classifications are there. The northern end segment is a B, which means its best uses are for primary and secondary recreation and fishing. The main lake north is an A, main lake mid-south, this really big blue segment, this is most of the lake, is a double A, water supply with limited treatment segment, and the southern end is class A. There is no active public water supply on the southern end, but it's still classified as an A, so we're still beholden to meet those standards for that classification. All right, so the TMDL recommends a 30% reduction, which equates to be 131,000 pounds of phosphorus per year. Combinations of point sources and non-point sources are needed to get those reductions. And how do we get there and measure progress? And so that number, the reduction per year, is a really big number. The reason why it's so big is that the data we collected over the 16-year period to get the total load of phosphorus to the lake incorporated some very, very wet years from Tropical Storm Lee, Hurricane Sandy, a couple of really big snowmelt event years in 2006 and 2004, which made the average load over that period very big. So when you take the average load and you cut it by 30%, it's a much higher reduction than if we had taken, say, the median or the driest year as an example. So these targets are important, but as I'll show later on, how the lake responds to our future actions is how we're going to gauge if this TMDL is ultimately being successful. So, go ahead. So the goals, this very brief schematic, you'll notice it says draft. I'm kind of beta testing this in terms of how we communicate who does what with TMDLs. But it starts at the top with the US EPA and the Clean Water Act, and they're implementing regulations through the Code of Federal Regs, down to states which have our own environmental conservation law and our own rules and regulations that we enforce, down through local folks that implement various actions in watersheds to improve and protect water quality, okay? And so the information coming down is policy programs and funding, information that comes back up from local sources back to the state, up to the EPA, our data and what we need in terms of resources, okay? And with regards to implementation, point source controls, so the regulation here off to your right, are implemented through New York State's Part 750 Speedies program. Also, our water quality standards live in that section as well, which we'll talk about. Implementing non-point source controls, which aren't regulated, are done by the organizations and many others that I've listed out here briefly. All right, so that's how essentially the teamwork approach is going to work to continue to protect and improve Cayuga Lake. Point source reductions in the TMDL, 3 state pollution discharge elimination system, that's the SPEEDIES acronym, are being modified to include phosphorus concentration limits. Part of what a TMDL does from a regulatory context is when it's done, the recommendations of the TMDL are implemented in those permit modifications the next time they happen, or immediately, depending on need. So Freeville, Interlaken, those processes are underway. Underway means they're at some step in the process of understanding when and where they need to meet the compliance. In the case of Interlaken, they're a little farther along than Freeville, but Freeville will be given time to build the structures and get the infrastructure needed to make that treatment level. It doesn't happen overnight. They're not instantly in violation of the new permit, right? Ithic area wastewater treatment, they have a mass limit, 40 pounds per day. That mass limit did not change. But they are being given a concentration limit to help protect on the back end. Not that we're assuming anyone's not treating on the lower flows, but that would have happened during their normal permit modification next time anyways. Okay. Non-point source reductions, obviously that's the lion's share of the load to Cayuga Lake, like it is a lot of the other Finger Lakes and in New York. Non-point source pollution implementation in TMDLs is largely addressed through voluntary means. Continued and more implementation of best management practices. which obviously being in a TMDL watershed gives you priority scoring on various state programs and grants, which the HABS action plan did as well. But again, the TMDL was required to move the impaired segment off of the 303D list. And we'll talk a little bit more about what voluntary means in a few minutes. So in the TMDL, you can get the total reductions that are needed, the total reductions by segment, in very long and detailed tables like this, where you're talking through what the current load is with permitted point sources, what the allocations or reductions that are needed for each of the segments, and within different land uses within each segment. It does provide some percent reductions by source sector, ag cultivated crops, ag hay, residential, septics. Those are recommended targets to hit. There's no regulatory hammer that comes down if you only get a 30% reduction instead of a 32 for this segment, but they're used to guide kind of in a broad sense what's needed in each sub-watershed of the TMDL watershed. Okay. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I thought this slide was useful. DEC's regulatory authority is outlined in New York Code of Rules and Regulations, that's the NYCRR, Title 6, Chapter 10, Part 760, which is online. Chapter 10 is Chapter X. Displays how the Division of Water, which we are in, classifies water bodies and provides the standards to protect their best uses, and how we implement the state pollution discharge elimination system. So anyone that's interested in kind of the state regs and how we enforce them, that's there. I won't spend too much time. But I think it's important for people to know that they are there in the background, working every day to make sure that people are not doing things that violate water quality standards, and that permitted dischargers are following the terms of their permits. Oh, I was just going to say that also the DEC regional offices, and Region 7 in this case, work very closely with county folks, soil and water districts when there are opportunities for education and enforcement on issues that arise. Okay. So in the TMDL, this pie chart it was supposed to be a bit more impressive, but it isn't.
Simple is better sometimes.
Yeah. So what this is supposed to be is of the 131,000 pounds that we say we need as a reduction target, kind of where are we and how much more do we need to kind of hit that? The achieved is kind of what we're achieving now that was presented in the TMDL, with a very important asterisk next to it. That asterisk is that 39,000 pounds is only a handful of state grants that the DEC administers or has access to from ag and markets at the moment. So if you think about the host of other programs that are happening, the host of ag and markets funding that the DEC isn't currently tracking in our database, I expect that number is much, much bigger in terms of what we're actually achieving, let alone county appropriations, let alone private works, et cetera. So one of the big challenges we have as an agency in ag and markets and kind of local folks is how do we get a better handle on the whole picture of what's happening? Not to burden people with more reporting to us, but in terms of just sharing where we're at in terms of good works happening in the watershed or needs.
So, hey, Tony?
Yeah.
So is that's only through grants or through stuff that these guys would do?
Well, I can give you,
Something on
it's
their own?
essentially, Greg, right now, it's the Water Quality Improvement Project program for the DEC administers. Ag non-point source grants that Ag and Markets implements, and climate resilient farming, I think, are the three big ones at the moment.
Are they gonna open that up? It'd be nice if we do a practice on our farm on X number of acres.
Yeah.
That would definitely help that number.
I think that's the next
Hope we don't
conversation.
report it, though.
I think we're working on how that could happen. We're building it out to conclude work done through the FLOPA program as an example. We're working through that.
And
With the
we've been
coalition
talking
work.
about it here through the AIM program too,
Yeah.
sensitive information and stuff, so not all farms are willing to open their books, so to speak, but that's something that we've talked about, of collecting some of that information that we'd be able to report on, say, your behalf, similar to highway departments, right? If the highway department does a job, it's not grant funded, that doesn't go in there either,
Right.
So it's like, how do we capture all the stuff that falls through?
So it's like cover crops, a lot of years I don't even report it, we just do one.
Sure, all those sorts of things are on the table for how we better, coordinate, and people want to submit those, how we do that without a lot of workload on your end, a lot of workload on our end. We're getting there. I think the conversations are happening, but with multiple state agencies, plus the Bond Act office, plus the federal sources, it's just a bit of a, yeah.
So the assumption on this is that the phosphorus load is steady.
Well,
Unless, let
oh.
me finish, unless there's something that impacts that. And that's why you track the programs. But, so how do you arrive at that solution? That the amount of phosphorus coming into the lake without intervention remains the same year after year after year? That seems a big assumption to me.
Well, we don't make that assumption. What we're saying is that the average reduction per year we need is 131,000. So that's based on the, if you look in the TMDL, it'll list, one of the accompanying reports lists out what the numbers are per year, and it very dramatically changes depending whether it's a dry year or wet year. But we can't really we can't assess or implement a load reduction allocation different for each year. So we have to do some broad level aggregation through the averaging.
So are there any plans then there's load information based on the years, given year, depending on, and I'm not sure the methodology to come up with that number, but there is one. Will that methodology be applied to subsequent years to determine if in fact the reduction is achieved versus it should be achieved based upon what we've done? Because there's a big difference, and that's my question.
Sure. Yep, and I'll answer it a couple different ways. So the answer is to get the level of information needed to do the loading calculations that are needed year after year after year is a very, very big investment in time and money for sampling, multiples of tributaries, multiples of times, multiples of events. So we're not planning to do that at the state level. What we're going to do is we're going to track implementation projects and then approved reduction coefficients per unit implementation. So hydroseeding a mile of ditch should cut phosphorus by X number. It's high level, it's not perfect. It's certainly not not detailed, right? Maybe as detailed as you're asking. But I think the thing that we'll talk about in a bit is we are really going to track what's happening in the lake to see how we're doing at the in-lake targets. So all of this implementation tracking is to show progress, to show where it's happening, where it might be needed, getting a rough sense of the load reductions that we're getting through the implementation. But the majority of how we'll evaluate the lake is how it's doing with regards to its chlorophyll and phosphorus levels.
So is DEC open to the idea of volunteers providing some of the manpower periodically? You wouldn't want to do it every year, obviously.
Yeah.
To periodically actually do the sampling that's necessary.
There are programs that do that, volunteer-based ones that the DEC administers. There are private folks that do it through their own programs. And you know, the DEC has a data solicitation period that they allow people to submit for assessments. For the type of loading I think that you're talking about, it's just a little different.
Yes.
So as an example, like the data inputs that went into the generation of loads for Fall Creek watershed, you know, for the Cayuga Lake TMDL, there were data collected in 2003, 4, 5, and 6 biweekly. So I don't know how many samples that ended up being, 20 something. And then in 2013, was the program I oversaw when I was not with DEC at Upstate Freshwater Institute. It was something like 100 manual grabs plus the installation of automated samplers to collect lots of hydrograph runoff event specific data sets, right? So that's one effort on one stream. We replicated that on 4 or 5 different streams. So it just depends on what local folks think is useful in terms of investing their resources. Because the loading estimation to kind of get an accurate number requires a lot of sampling, a lot. So let me run through and we can talk about that more at the end. So again, on progress, that 39,000 pounds in the Cayuga Lake TMDL, the table is listed out kind of where those projects were done through the state programs that we track. It was something like 40 implementation projects, things like stream bank stabilization, things like cover crops, things like manure storage. More than 14 million in funding to Cayuga for those sorts of things to get at those reduction numbers that we listed in the TMDL. And obviously that's just a fraction of what actually gets done. So continued implementation of the TMDL. Section 7 of the TMDL has good recommendations. I'm not going to read through all of these, of course, but they're all there in terms of how the DEC regulates its programs. BMPs and recommendations if people are looking for suggestions on things to do. They're listed out for ag and non-ag practices in terms of reducing total phosphorus and dissolved phosphorus, which is important, and compliance and enforcement and how the other categories were looked at in the generation of the numbers. In addition to the TMDL, obviously folks here are aware of the different types of clean water plans that are available for Cayuga Lake. There's a HABs action plan, there's drinking water source protection plans, the watershed restoration and protection plan, and the plans developed kind of locally through soil and water districts, et cetera. Obviously, any of the practices listed in those that reduce phosphorus would align perfectly with what the TMDL recommends in terms of phosphorus reductions. Go ahead. So now that the TMDL is done, in continuation of using something like the HABs action plan, use it to coordinate, use it to leverage grant money as it's available through state programs at the DEC, Environmental Facilities Corp, Department of State, Ag and Markets. Those are just a handful. And there's federal funding, Finger Lakes and Great Lakes specific funding through state programs, through my program, through the Great Lakes program, FLOPA, Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and other specific grants. And so the money is out there. It's competitive in a lot of cases. Some cases it's not. Continue to work together and go after the gaps and find the funding that you need to continue implementing. Go ahead. Oh, the tracking thing. Yeah, so back to the tracking. So we're working on internally at the DEC and with our other state and local partners on how best to track these things moving forward. What makes sense. Obviously, there are some privacy concerns with point of location BMPs, but reporting it at an appropriate scale will be important. But my colleague on my staff, Lexi Davis, is working on a tracking database. This also says draft, by the way, so it's not ready for public use. But it's looking at the different state pots, different state grants and where they're being done, providing summaries of dollars invested, what the projects were, and expected load reductions from those practices. And she's also starting to build out her coding software to go after federal money, like the GRI, the Infrastructure Investment Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act related to water quality are trackable now online. And Ag and Markets, obviously, we're building, and New York State we have a good handle on because those are the projects that we implement. Okay. Monitoring programs. There's a lot of them in New York. There's a lot of data being collected in Cayuga and the rest of the Finger Lakes. Here's a small list of some of them. This Division of Water monitoring portal is showing all of the stream and lake locations that the DEC has data for in the state. The orange are streams, the blue are lakes. Some are one-off sampling, some are long-term trend sites. Cayuga has been multiple sites in the CSLAP program for 6 or 7 years now, and have had in the past as well. So we're going to continue to implement those monitoring programs to evaluate how the lake is doing with our watershed actions into the future. Okay, so update time. In-lake targets, summer average chlorophyll over the 2018 to 2023 period. What this table is showing summer average chlorophyll, those are the numbers, right? For the southern end, mid-south, mid-north, and northern end, against their Cayuga Lake targets, is listed in the TMDL. Okay. Yellow means we're meeting or rounding to the target listed in the TMDL. Gray means we're not quite there yet. So you can see it's kind of hit or miss depending on the section, but the southern end is meeting its 6 microgram per liter target in 5 out of 6 years. The mid-north is meeting its 6 microgram per liter target in 5 out of 6 years. Mid-south is 4 micrograms per liter, which is why it's not meeting the same as the other two. It's a little bit more strict of a target to hit. Okay, and the northern end is a higher because it's a recreation body at 8, and so it's meeting it about half the time. And so the continued implementation, the continued tracking will allow us to understand how these water body segments are doing compared to what the TMDL is requesting. Go ahead. That's it for me. I do have some time series plots of a few of the data sets from the main lake in the southern end. If we have time, I didn't want to overrun, but
why not?
All right, click. Let's do it.
Everyone's interested.
Oh, so Cayuga Lake is lucky. A lot of the Finger Lakes are lucky to have a long-term record upon which to compare current data with older data. Okay. These are time series. It's not an every year thing, so keep an eye on the markers here. So from the late 90s through current for total phosphorus in this upper right-hand corner. The red bar is the guidance value of 20, and averaging the old period versus the new period there shows that it's about the same, maybe a little bit higher currently. Southern end chlorophyll A, the red bar is the 6, that's the chlorophyll target for the TMDL. And again, over time, right before 2013 and then after 2018, about the same, maybe a little bit higher for chlorophyll A. Although this year was particularly problematic, caused that average to shoot way up. Otherwise, it's kind of meeting that 6 most of the time, which is good. Okay. This is the main lake segment for Cayuga Lake, so that really big segment from like Lansing all the way up to Aurora, which holds, I think, 80% of the lake area and volume, so the vast majority of the lake. Same sort of time frame, although we did have some data in a report from the 70s, that black bar there, looking at the pre-2013 period and post. Essentially, on average, no change. It depends on the year to year, right? Whether it's a warm, hot year or something else is driving phosphorus conditions. And then chlorophyll, which I think will be a challenge for the main lake Mid-South, is that the average hasn't changed much year to year, right? Up, down, sometimes above.
Sorry.
No, you're okay. Sometimes at. But the 4 microgram per liter target in that main lake segment is it's a very aggressive target, let's say, because historically Cayuga has not been a 4 microgram per liter chlorophyll lake. So obviously continued efforts to improve and get that chlorophyll number down to the extent we can will be the challenge moving forward. And the northern end, we won't talk too much about the northern end, but the northern end is also the next big one, just because it does have relatively elevated phosphorus and chlorophyll compared to the rest of the lake. So the rest is a question one, so I think we can end it there, and I'll bring that up if it comes up in question.
Okay, what's a lot like about 10 minutes for questions? I think people are going to have quite a few. So can I kick it off with a question? For voluntary measures, curious what type of data you'd like a local health department to start collecting, or because I mean I've got tons of data about septic systems that are lakefront in both the midsection and the northern section is essentially entirely sewered, thank goodness. But
right, and it's adding more sewering soon, right?
I mean, we'll see.
Yeah.
Very funding dependent, but
Sure.
I do have information already of things of the last 5 years, septic systems that have been replaced, upgraded holding tanks now, what type of, do you just want addresses and what they're doing, or?
I'll figure that out.
Okay.
I think the hard part is workload on you and workload on
I mean,
on
our
my
data is
program.
very accessible.
Okay.
So,
But I think with the implementing of Cayuga's TMDL plus all the other clean water plans in the Finger Lakes, I need to kind of think through what it
sure.
would need to look like.
No rush.
Yeah, no, but it's a good question though, because again, it's one of those things where at the state level, we're not aware, right?
Yeah, like how does Greg report what he's doing?
Yeah, there's lots of instances like those things. Let me
sure.
think about how that could work, because even if we
Okay.
don't necessarily know what to assign in terms of like a phosphorus coefficient or reduction, the progress is the progress, right?
Yeah, sure.
But I'll think about that. We can talk later on.
Okay, and it may become moot, hopefully, a moot point to report, because hopefully it will be sewered, but I think that's all dependent on a lot of other factors as well.
but it happens elsewhere too in the watershed too, right? So no, I'll give that some thought and think about how we could implement that.
Okay, cool. Anyone else have any other questions?
Sure.
Adam?
Tony, thanks for your presentation. So I'm curious, what do you see are the barriers to advancing projects and programs for these various water bodies? As you mentioned, there are a wide variety of clean water plans, and we have approvals for Cayuga and Owasco as well. I'm curious, we understand that these plans are pathways to funding, right? And what are some of the ways that you might be addressing barriers around actually funding local organizations to do the work?
Yeah, I didn't list it in here just because I was tight for time, but I think one of the big barriers we've been able to hurdle over has been the 1.2 million for district capacity in the EPF as part of the State of the State announcement. So those of you that you're familiar, I'm sure, but as part of the state of the state, and as we in the DEC were wrapping up some of these clean water planning efforts, the HABS action plan, if you recall, 6 years ago now, recommended as a priority action to provide non-competitive funding to stormwater water conservation districts so that they can hire more staff to do the implementing on the ground and do more technical assistance and do more, of everything that they need to do. And so we were able to secure that in this year's budget. We're working through developing those contracts to start getting that money out to the districts. It's in progress right now, actually. So that's one piece. The capacity piece locally is big, right? And so that's a victory for sure. The other one is I think maybe not necessarily competitive grant funding, but other sources of funding that are available maybe in a non-competitive way. And so you will probably also recall that on the tail end of that 1.2 million per year for capacity, we were able to secure $42 million in Bond Act and Clean Water Infrastructure Act funding for the Eastern Finger Lakes Coalition, just to implement projects identified in AIM 3 plans and a list of others. And so those two big hurdles, I don't know if we're over them, but we're working our way over them, and we'll see how they go over the next few years in terms of spending the money, implementing, and getting projects started and finished.
Great, thanks, Tony.
So other than that, I think it's going to be adaptive. Implement, monitor, what are we doing, right? That sort of thing. So
Great. I have one more question for you.
I'm not running the show. Michelle's running the show. So.
I guess so.
I'm joking.
Curious whether you could speak to the commonalities between the overarching features and recommendations of both the Cayuga and the Owasco plans. They both generally pointed to about 90% of the TP load being watershed sourced.
Right.
And then also the recommendation for 30% reductions. Those were the two key features that were.
Sure. I think the 30% reduction on the TMDL side, I think that's explained in the TMDL to get to the chlorophyll targets. The 30% reduction on Owasco's 9E, I'd have to rely on the 9E writers. I think it was to maintain a chlorophyll target of 4 micrograms per liter in the lake, I think, to kind of offset various changes and kind of keep it right at 4. In terms of the similarities and differences, from a New York State perspective, both the 9-element plan and a TMDL are scored the same in terms of WQIP projects, in terms of priority scoring for clean water planning. There are differences. A question on the TMDL is if a water body is impaired for phosphorus, as an example, like Cayuga was, the EPA will not accept the 9-element plan to remove it from the impaired waters list. It's their framework, but they don't allow that to move it from the impaired list, so we had to do a TMDL for Cayuga. There's other reasons too. The southern end of Cayuga, you may know, has 5 or 6 different point sources that drain into that watershed or that segment directly, which is very different than Owasco, which has 2 very small treatment plants kind of at the very southern end, right? So does that answer your question,
yes,
or was there something else? So, okay.
Thanks, Tony.
But in terms of how we implement, there's no difference other than the 9-element plan doesn't have the regulatory thrust on the Speedies wastewater treatment plants that the TMDL does.
More questions? Yeah.
So with the different sections of the lake, you've got the southern end that has a little bit higher allowable phosphorus or chlorophyll than the lower south or mid-south, whatever.
Yeah.
So that southern water would have to get really clean in order to meet the goals of the next.
That's the tricky.
The lake's flowing north, so.
The tricky part of the lake is that, yeah.
You would think it would get dirtier as it goes up.
It doesn't though. Yeah, but I
Assuming
yeah.
constant load, you really have to clean up that southern end to get the northern sections.
Yeah, it's actually interesting, Greg. So the southern end is actually, because it receives so much of the tributary input, actually is generally higher in phosphorus than the rest of the lake, because a lot of it settles out kind of before it gets to the big segment there. And the way that the water exchanges, and one of the reasons why we went to a whole lake approach and whole watershed approach is because the way the lake mixes, a lot of the water from that main lake actually does make its way south, the way that the lake kind of currents move. And the way that the internal motions and the currents will put open water, deep segment water onto the shelf area at times to really interact how those two things. But the challenge is still there because it's like you're not just treating the southern end, which is a very small section. You have to treat that watershed plus the rest of it to kind of make sure that all the segments are meeting their uses.
Yeah, although, did I misread, or isn't the northern section the highest load for phosphorus and chlorophyll A?
It has the highest concentrations of phosphorus. Yeah. Very shallow area, impacted locally. Definitely going to be a bit of a challenge, just given the nature of how it does receive the bulk of the inputs as the lake flows north to the river.
But it's also not a drinking water supply for anyone.
It's a recreation source, so the thresholds are higher.
Well, because it's not a drinking water source, because Cayuga had to find another one.
Well, that was more a product of their water treatment plant versus water quality in the lake.
Can you make that clear a distinction?
I mean, based on at least this, I wasn't here when that happened, but I mean, the treatment, the ability to treat and upgrade that water treatment plant, it costs less money to interconnect with an existing treatment plant that was meeting standards.
But that wasn't in the northern segment, though. That was in
that was in the village of Cayuga.
in the mid-north segment, not the northern, right?
Oh, I forget that there's,
Oh, really? Where's the northern segment start? I'm sorry, I have to look at this way.
No, if you look at
I
the
thought it
info
was the
locator,
northern-
DEC info locator, it'll tell you the boundaries.
Oh, okay.
Now, I might be wrong, but I don't think we would have
I
a
thought
a public
the
water supply
village-
in a B segment. Maybe
Well, it's
there
not
would-
anymore.
No, it's not anymore.
It's not anymore, and it hasn't been since,
Maybe.
for 10, 15 years.
Unless
now.
I'm confused too.
2013, I think, is when it.
We can circle back, and I can find out the answer to that. But.
Yeah, that's
I'm
when
telling you.
that's when Aurelius Water District 3 happened. Was 2013,
Wow.
Interesting.
which serves village of Cayuga.
Yeah.
That's true.
Anyways, that's probably a moot point, but.
Yeah, I have a question. What other type of benefits do you expect might happen as a result of decreased phosphorus loading or the TMDL? You know, in terms of like, sometimes there are sampling events on Great Gully Creek that show extremely high levels of E. coli.
I see.
Like things like that.
Co-benefits of
co-benefits,
practices. Yeah. Yep, no, good question. So, so anything obviously that is reducing phosphorus is also going to be reducing other things. So the non-point source database that the DEC is building that we're hoping to track will also track sediment and nitrogen as coefficient reductions based on BMPs, which is great. I don't know if there's anything in the works specifically for E. coli.
It would be cool for at least the recreational sections.
Yeah.
you know,
I'll have to
but
give that some
of
thought.
course-
There might be coefficients we can kind of apply,
Yeah.
but obviously if it's something like an upgrade to a wastewater treatment plant with disinfection, that's going to help,
of
right?
course.
So I think the co-benefits are there.
Yeah.
How to track them maybe is not
Yeah, I
quite
was
so
wondering
clear,
if there
but-
was like an input or an output in the model that would be able to give you more than just chlorophyll A and or TP or DP or whatever.
Not at the
So,
moment, but there
okay.
might be some kind of like post hoc coefficients that we could apply to the practices to see how they could be benefiting
Okay,
those other things.
okay, cool. And then I have a follow-up question on the modeling.
Yeah.
Are you guys going to be continuing to develop and recalibrate and see if there's any changes that you can implement with better technologies
No.
to make the model better? No, you're
No.
just going to use what you've got?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that level of effort
It's
for
high,
what we actually
yeah.
get in terms of focusing
Sure.
resources on the implementation and the tracking. I'm trying to even think of a staff member at the
Cost
DEC
benefit,
that
not
could.
there.
Yeah.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Or shall we continue? Thank you so much, Tony. That was
Oh,
a
thank you
really
all very
great
much.
presentation.
It's nice to be here talking
Yeah.
about the final TMDL.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah, that was really, really informative. I learned a lot.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Let's just make sure to grab that before I go.
You can just take it.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna,
Michelle?
can I just say this real quick? It's not responding. Does it look okay? Can you choose again?
Yeah, there's no screen to share anymore.
Can't see what I'm doing. I'll let you send me the PDF.
I'll email you the PDF. Yeah, that'll be easier.
Oh, I didn't ask online if online had any questions.
Oh,
but
right.
I
Sorry.
I figured
Yeah,
you
yeah,
would
please.
put it in the chat if you did. If anyone has a question, you want to raise your hand real quick. Grayson!
Don't I have to shut that, or can I just pull it
Hey there.
out?
You can.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you. Yep.
Time will tell.
Tony, I wanted to ask you,
Yeah. Hey, Grayson.
hey, where is the C-SLAP sampling location in the southern end?
The C-slap location. I could get you that.
Okay.
They usually put it like centroid segment, but I don't know offhand. But the coordinates I could get a hold for you.
Okay, I'm just curious because CSI has 2 monitoring locations on the southern portion, 2 out of 4, and 2 of them are by the outfalls of the Ithaca Area Wastewater Treatment Facility and the Cayuga Heights Sewage Treatment Plant. And in
won't be there.
2023, yeah, I figured.
It wouldn't be approximate to like a mixing zone of a speedies discharger, but.
Yeah, we have a control location that we compare to them as well, and I just wanted to get a sense of maybe where your location was so we could use it to compare our data to.
Sure. Shoot me an email to remind me, and I'll get that for you.
I will. Thank you.
If I remember, it compared fairly well. The CSI C-SLAP sites at the northern end and the southern end, the ones that aligned, I think were pretty close in terms of summer average anyways. But yeah, send me an email. I'll follow up.
Okay.
All right, Cheryl asks, are the slides available or will a recording of this session be available? Oh my gosh, we record all of our meetings and post them on YouTube. You guys didn't know that? Just kidding. But we do post them on YouTube. A recording will be provided and we will have access to the
I'll email the
slides.
PDF. Yeah.
So yes.
Thanks.
And we will let you know, Cheryl, how to get there. Are we going to post it on our website?
There's a link to the YouTube on the website.
Perfect. We have a website too. Did anyone know that? Okay, cool. What's so funny?
Well, I'm just wondering, is it connected to the county's website?
No.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah. You
Well, I
can
mean,
get to
it's
the
not a
WQMA
county
website.
website, but
It's
Well,
linked
you can
on
link.
the county website.
in other words, it might be searchable and usable?
It is easier. It's very good. Michelle does a rocking job with it. You can just look up, like, do a search engine for Cayuga County WQMA, and it shows right up. It's a great little site. Okay, so just note, the village of Cayuga, most of the village of Cayuga is in that mid-north section. However, the line is right by Route 1, I guess. So I don't know exactly where the water treatment plant was located and where their intake was. Because like the wastewater treatment plant is in that north-north section, so.
Yeah, I can get you the boundaries of the segments, but I wouldn't be able to help otherwise.
Yeah, I don't know where the water treatment plant was either, so. Okay, any other questions online? Okay, great, thanks so much, Tony.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Okay, any new business? Anyone have any new business to report? No, it's snowing. Any committee reports?
Just real quick from the communication group, we are trying to get our December newsletter together, so if you have any articles, send those to Michelle. And one of the things we do once a month, and again, this is one of those things where I say we, I really mean Michelle, is she puts a blog post up, and it's helpful if she has a short article from time to time that's ready to go. So that happens every month if you got something. And again, you can send that to Michelle because she does the actual posting of it.
Thanks.
And I do want to let everybody know that I've updated a bunch of the lake pages. So I updated Cayuga Cross Lake, Seneca River, Lake Como, Duck Lake, Owasco Lake, and Skinny Atlas Lake. I'm trying to make them all consistent.
Perfect. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Agency reports. I don't really have too much to report for the health department. just trying to get as many septic systems approved as possible. We've done quite a few grant projects this summer, which was really nice. And I was gonna say something else. It'll come to me eventually. How about Parks Department? I don't see Doug anywhere. Planning Department.
Sure, so we'll be quick also. If I miss anything, I'll let Michelle chime in. I think she's reported before, but just as a reminder, Nick Colas's work on our SWAT model, the 9E, is ending at the end of this year, the end of December. He has been working when he can with our new GIS analyst, Brad Thomas, to get him up to date so that he can kind of take over a little bit with just maintenance of the model going forward. Michelle and Doug and his folks are continuing to work together on Wasco Flats and management and kind of what that looks like going forward in that transition. And then new things, just really quickly, as we do every year, early November, we opened our purchase of development rights pre-application program for all of our farms. Those applications are due December 30th, so if you know of anyone, nudge them. Information's all online. You can contact myself or Emily Antonacci in the office. We'll get you the paperwork. And also, Emily and Dan and Doug and a couple others, we put our heads together to figure out how we can provide some technical assistance for some new and beginning farmer grant funding that the state has put out to help some farmers that are interested in that be able to submit those applications. There's up to 95% funding available, and it runs the gamut, including purchase of land and equipment and putting up buildings and all sorts of things. So Emily's fielded a few questions so far, but she's put out some press releases, and I know you guys have spread the word too.
And those are for new farmers?
New and beginning farmers, and then there's a separate track for disadvantaged.
Yeah.
How is
minority
reviewer
farms.
defined in that grant process?
I'd have to go back and look at the definition, but I think the program's pretty broad, so it's like if you haven't been doing this before and you want to get into farming or you want to make a major change. I don't think like Greg's gonna be able to apply for that funding for anything, but
if Greg adopts Keith, can he be a new farmer?
right.
What, I got 50 acres.
Send the paperwork over.
Yeah, I got 50 acres, maybe of course, no one wants to farm it.
Good place for manure.
No, it's not.
Shoot me an email and we can send you the information.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious. I don't have it. I don't have any. I'm not interested in having anyone of mine, but I do talk to people. So
Yeah, it was a recent announcement, funding that the state hasn't had in a while, so we're excited about
actually, maybe I will send you something.
how we can help people put the application together. There's lots of resources, and folks will have to kind of talk to and get soils maps and stuff depending on what they want, but we're trying to provide some technical assistance for folks that want to apply. One.
Thanks, Carrie.
Carrie, what was the name of your new GIS expert?
Brad Cometh.
Brad? Comma?
Komemeth.
Thanks. Do you expect that Brad will continue to garner the SWAT model for Owasco? Hard to say at this point.
He's learning.
Okay.
The problem is it took so long to validate and calibrate the model this time around.
Yeah, Nick's kind of run out of time left in his contract, money in his contract to be able to do a full training for Brad, but he's got a little bit of time he's gonna set aside to try to do a quick, get him up to speed-ish. He's provided a lot of materials and other training and stuff for him to kind of work on getting up to speed, so it'll be dependent on where we go next with the model and what happens after that.
Okay. Thanks, Carrie.
Okay, soil and water, Doug.
All right, just a couple comments. Tony, thanks for the presentation. A lot of good information in there. When he was talking about the plans, just remember, a lot of the grants that we put in for, if you have one plan, that's usually good enough. If you have 5 plans, you don't get 5 times the amount of points, right? And so we have a lot of plans in some of these lakes, so it's good that we have all these plans, but just remember that the more plans doesn't necessarily mean the more points in many cases. Also, you talked a little bit about the 1.2 million. Just a reminder, that's split between 11 soil and water districts. There's a misconception out there that $1.2 million or $40 million is coming to the Cayuga County Soil and Water Conservation District. And unfortunately, that's not the case. And I'd love to take the full 41 million, but I think my counterparts in 10 other counties would have a problem with that. And the money's going to be great to help us out, but unfortunately, when we get budget cuts, it kind of helps at least keep us steady. So, but with regards to the district, we got the tree going on. Thank you to the planning department for working with us on that. So after Christmas, what happens is people drop their real Christmas trees off. We end up mulching them. We'll probably be putting them into compost filter socks and using them on other projects. And that program goes from the day after Christmas, when we're around, through January 17th. So if people drop their tree off, they get a coupon. This year we'll be giving out balsam firs. And they pick up the balsam fir seedling, not that day, but at our tree sale that we'll have later on in the spring, usually around April or so.
Hey Doug,
May 9th.
I took Valerie's article from last year's newsletter and updated it.
Awesome.
It should be in your email.
Cool.
Just to confirm.
That's awesome. Other than that, really, we're just doing some reporting and collecting all the bills that are coming in now that, for the cover crops and the projects that were done late fall. Now that people have a chance to breathe a little bit, they're kicking some information to us and invoices and working on grant closeouts. And then there's still one more grant that we have to apply to. We haven't heard from the last grant we put in, but we're meeting with a bunch of people and doing some ag now point applications right now, and that's due in the springtime. So still rolling. Yes, sir.
So what you just said was that with the budget cuts, the new funding money that you're getting from the DEC is only going to do status quo. It's not going to do what it was supposed to do?
Pretty much. Yep. And actually, the cut from the counties more than what the DEC is going to be kicking to us. So, yeah, so the good news is we're not losing anybody and we can at least keep plugging ahead. But it's a good thing. It's good timing, I guess, by the DEC to provide us funding.
But it goes against the intent of the program.
Sure does. But, yeah.
So how does the intent of the program measure success?
The money's gonna move from the state to the districts, and they'll use it how they can to either maintain or build capacity.
Right, we're gonna get more projects. We're gonna continue to get projects done and apply for grants. And last year was the first year we ever, because we were stretched so thin, just people-wise, we couldn't apply for everybody that wanted to apply for the grants. There's more money out there than we've ever seen, and it's gonna be hard finding people time to go after them. That's the downside. But the good news is there's no gap, right? So that this funding's gonna come in and we're able to keep rolling to the capacity we can keep rolling.
How much are you expected of the Eastern Finger Lakes Coalition money?
For the 1.2 million, we're still finalizing the scope of work and all that.
The 41 million or 42 million?
Yeah, that one
That's different. That's implementation money only.
Oh,
So
got
the
it.
capacity is
Okay.
1.2 per year for the 11 districts to use how they.
So it's distributed. The
how they-
1.2 that's $120,000 if you were to divide that.
For
by-
how they need to maintain operations or build operations.
But
That
there's
is- That is
engineering.
one person.
There's other
worth of-
costs and stuff like that.
So Tony, is that hard money? Is that for a certain period of time? How long is that going to be in the budget for?
It'll depend on year-to-year appropriations, but it's a line item in the EPF, which is the best we could do. So, we've made the same request for next budget.
And the EPF budget, if anybody wants to support any of that, that's the area to support, because that's where we go after CRF money, Ag Point money, WQIP money. A lot of the funds that we have access to are in the
LOPA.
EPF budget.
LOPA's an EPF.
LOPA, yeah.
Even our DOS money that we use for implementation of our waterfront revitalization plans and stuff to do some of the additional work, and some of our ag money is all EPF, so.
Good pot.
So with the county, how, are you going to lose any positions at your place?
Ask me that question next Thursday.
Yeah, exactly.
She hasn't received the bad news yet.
I
That's
know,
right.
there's one part-time position, definite, that is going, but ask me next Thursday.
Let's have a meeting. Really? Thursday night or Thursday morning?
Thursday night at the Legends.
So
That's next Thursday?
Yeah.
No, I wasn't sure when you
Okay.
I think just about everyone that has a county department sitting at this table right now has lost some funding.
They have budgeted and told me that I need to bring in more revenue for my towns and villages, but there's a possibility that I will be losing the staff that will do that work.
Do more with less. That's what they say.
Yeah, right. And also for fun, Ed, without me having had the chance to talk to my towns and villages to make sure that they have budgeted that money to come to me to do work for you guys. So we're having a lot of fun.
It's kind of late after our budgets have passed. Pretty good timing.
Okay. Moving on. Solid waste management program, Evan.
I have good news.
Yes,
So
finally.
the county legislature passed a resolution to adopt the local solid waste management plan. So we submitted the final draft to the DEC, and they're reviewing it right now. I don't know how long it'll take until we get final approval, but hopefully soon.
This is the big accomplishment. Our current plan's from 1992. Expired in 2010. So.
All right, Tony, get on it. Just kidding.
Oh, different division.
I know.
I have enough to do with water.
This was a big lift for Evan, and we are very grateful that he was able to take it on and get us across the finish line.
No, that's great though.
Okay, thank you so much, Evan.
I have a quick question
Congratulations.
for Evan. Are there programs out there available that municipalities can apply for to try to obtain like standardized collection, like garbage cans and recycling?
Yeah, there's capital infrastructure grants for recycling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of the names off the top of my head, but I don't have them. But yeah, there are some available through either the state or the EPA.
You can,
Yeah,
you
if you
can
could shoot
email
them
him
over
that.
to me,
Yeah,
that would be.
email you.
I don't know if it would have any impact on, it probably won't on the crow population, but the city of Auburn doesn't standardize their trash
I think garbage
system.
cans instead of just cheap,
And-
clear bags on the curb.
And if
probably
we,
help.
had some sort of a program that required standardization and containerizing waste, I think that might help.
Yeah.
So,
Syracuse just implemented that.
yeah.
Maybe it'd be worth asking them if they have any
Yeah,
resources
it takes
or how they paid for it.
modifications to the trucks, you
Yeah.
know, it needs to be a whole fleet that comes along with that.
Mhm.
Maybe there's something in the middle that wouldn't require us buying all new packers.
Of course.
Well, you
yeah.
can still, make them put everything bagged in the
Correct.
trash can and then just
Correct.
pull the bags out of the cans
Right.
instead of having the tippers, but
Yeah, because the city of Auburn loads by hand into the trash. Yeah, it's good exercise.
Yes, it transforms one's body.
Yeah.
Sure.
our
We could all
town's
probably, I could stand to do that for a few months.
Right? Okay, great. Cornell Cooperative.
So we working with several folks in this room, Hannah Hibbs, seminar workshop back in, it was only a couple weeks ago, but it was the middle of November. And had good attendance. Greg's gonna talk a little bit more about that, what we're thinking about for follow-up, but appreciate Seth, Greg, and Tony all spoke, and I know several people here attended. Oh, Doug, too. Sorry, Doug.
That's all good.
I can't believe I did that.
That's all right. If I got offended that easily, I don't know if I can sit here.
That's all I got for right now. Other, working on year-end stuff like a lot of other folks with reporting and that sort of thing.
Great. City of Auburn?
Okay, I'm a little depressed now after the county updates.
We can move on.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Wasn't kidding.
Down to Owasco.
finally going out for bid in the next day or two for our sewer separation, water line replacement, so they'll be hitting the streets shortly.
Okay, sounds good. All right, Cayuga Lake report.
Yeah, just a couple of things that I think there was a hydrilla kind of update last night that was sponsored by the Cayuga Lake Watershed Network that had people from the presenters from DEC, from the Army Corps, and a couple others that went through the entire history of hydrilla in the lake, what had been done, what has been done, what the plans are, and what the success has been. And it was surprisingly good. I thought, and I say surprising because I thought, I was around for hydrilla when it first was, and I thought I had a good understanding. And and when it's all presented in that kind of concise format, I went, damn, I'd forgotten that. I'd forgotten that. I didn't know that. And so I found it very, very, very good presentation. The next week, at the Museum of the Earth, on the side of Cayuga Lake, there's a program on the TMDL and then some kind of related information that's being sponsored by the Watershed Network as well as CLEO and maybe some other sponsors. So anyone that can come to that. The one last night was available by Zoom. So if you didn't Zoom in or didn't attend, you missed it. Although all of those are recorded. And I think the recording would be very much worth listening to. I don't think there's a Zoom option for the one next week, so you have to come in person. That's at the Museum of the Earth, and I think that one's at 6:30. So that we'll get to be more on TMDL and some other issues as well. So I think that's the most recent quarterly report from the Watershed Network is out, and I should have brought copies, but I didn't. And so that's not my fault. I'm still struggling trying to determine whose fault it is, but I think it's DEC's fault. You're easy to blame. Just saying.
I'm just nodding.
No,
Smiling
I picked
on.
some up and I don't know what I was thinking. So,
I'm glad it went well. I know that they're working hard on the hydrilla problem.
the hydrilla, it was very, very good. And I go to a fair number of these and it was excellent.
Thank you. Cross Lake, Seneca River. I don't know what that 607 number is, but I'm thinking that's probably not Carl. Has anyone heard from Carl? I messaged him a few weeks ago and he did not get back to me. Okay, maybe I'll stop by his house. He lives down the road from me. Okay. Okay, sorry. Yes, Roxy, what's up? Oh, yeah, sorry, Cayuga.
I can't hear you.
You're muted. Yeah, it does.
There it is. Okay. I don't use this format very often. Sorry, I hear myself reverbing.
And sorry, 1 second, Roxy. We only have 20 minutes left in our meeting. Just
Okay, very short. Okay, so our November meeting was with Anna Kellis and Rachel May. We had some super great discussions about their water-related legislation and the process in general. If you weren't able to attend, I suggest you check out our meeting recording, which is on your YouTube page. Thank you so much for hosting us. We also just submitted a request for an extension for public comment on Cargill's permit modification request to store more salt brine in a different part of their mine. And if you didn't know that that's out, all the information is in an email I just sent to members. You guys probably have it already. If not, Michelle can share it. And comments currently are due by December 20th. And you have one more crack at Tony. If you can't make the public meeting on the 12th, he will be at the CLEO Zoom-only meeting on January 22nd. So start thinking of super hard questions for that one. And the last thing is Isaac and Ian from Seneca Lake are going to submit for a planning grant to GLRI, and they're looking for the low-hanging fruit, easy stormwater type projects, engineering, West on municipal land, but they're looking for a bunch of those so they can apply the following year for implementation funds to get a lot of that stuff implemented. So shoot him any ideas you have, and that's what I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roxy. Just note the event is on December 11th, not the 12th.
Oh, so sorry. I do that all the time just for fun.
Okay, thank you. All right, Little Service Bay. I don't see anyone online unless that's 607. I don't know who that 607 number is. So,
Did you skip like
oh my,
Like
yeah, Pat. What's going on?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Just wanted to quickly report, I finally got an answer from DEC. They listed out 3 things that they want added to the wetlands permit. It's gone off to Solitude. I'm waiting for them to put their responses together, answer the questions that they had, and hopefully we get this done at the end of the year, but keep fingers crossed. And side note, it's snowing so hard here I can barely see across the lake, but Lake Como's about half frozen over, but I don't know if it's gonna last. The warm weather is gonna get next week. But we're starting to get some ice up here. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Pat. Okay, we already established no one from Little Service Bay, right?
Right.
Owasco Lake report.
Anne's there.
Yes. Hi.
Hi,
My
Ann.
first message. Hi. If you please remember to wear your sunscreen when you're outside and on the lake. I wish I had known about that 70 years ago. So please, I'm not that scary right now, but doing better. For Aula, we have a grant fund writer who is helping us look at projects and proposals. We've done some strategic planning and getting some direction for next year and the year after. We will have an article to submit for your newsletter in December. We have an outreach project that we are working with the Management Council this coming weekend. Our planning for the Bob Brower Scientific Symposium is coming along very well. And that's my report.
Thank you, Anne. I'm not seeing anyone for Skinny Atlas Lake.
Unless Aaron wants to. Is Aaron still there?
No, Aaron left.
Oh, okay.
But I'm gonna give his report for Regional Planning Development Board. The Winding Way Stream Bank Stabilization Project on Skinny Atlas Lake is moving forward with the Skinny Atlas Lake Association and Onondaga County taking the lead. So I guess that works for Skinny Atlas Lake. The Regional Planning Development Board is hosting an additional series of virtual stormwater workshops this upcoming year. More information to follow on that. They're designed primarily for engineers, but anyone can attend. Each half-day course gets you 4 engineering PDHs, and there is a $175 fee for each workshop. The first one is going to be on 2/26, and it will go through the new stormwater design manual. Okay, Great Lakes.
No.
No?
No.
Sorry. Prism?
Amy's there.
Hi, everyone. Just a quick update, nothing new to report since giving you some of our program outputs last meeting, but just again going to plug that the Finger Lakes Institute is hosting another Finger Lakes Research Conference. So that's the 2025 Finger Lakes Research Conference on Thursday, January 30th. We'd love to see you all there.
Great, thank you, Amy. Okay, Finger Lakes Water Hub. I think we got a fairly decent report from Tony when he was here. Watershed Management Council.
Sure. Thanks. Good morning, everyone. For an update on our inspection division work, our existing watershed inspector, Jesse Lloyd, we introduced him here a couple of months back, He's been actively responding to field calls over the last couple of months here. He recently responded and coordinated mitigation response among partners, including the district and others on scene, to a November 26th sewer system failure in Fleming. And also, of course, it being the season, manure spreading has been very active over the last couple of months within the watershed, and he's been inspecting for non-permissible spreading activities within 75 feet of watercourses. For our 9-element coordination committee efforts, firstly, we're focused on pulling together our projects and programming implementation data for the last year and a half of work since the committee was formed. As Tony mentioned in his presentation, of course, measuring performance is important, but I think it's also important for motivating the various members of this committee and for the committee itself to continue to be productive. Secondly, we'll be working with the City of Auburn, scoping out developing an RFP for a stream corridor assessment project for the Owasco Lake Huck 12. That's the northern sub-watershed, and that's under their New York State grant. This project will provide synergies with proposed land acquisitions there by the Finger Lakes Land Trust, also a member of that committee. Regarding our Owasco Inlet Stream Restoration Project, the engineering consultant is now drafting a 60% design, and they've started with the DEC and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permitting package that needs to get completed before we can implement during the 2025 construction season. Thanks to SUNY ESF for partnerships on a couple of projects. Their Tully Field Station will be providing shrub willow for soft practice installation under that stream restoration project that will be implemented in partnership with Cayuga County Soil and Water. And also assistant professors who assisted with data analysis for the tributary monitoring program last year will be presenting their findings and recommendations during our upcoming public board meeting on the 17th. We have a student from the college also interested in characterization of the relationship between freshwater sponges and water quality conditions across the Finger Lakes region, and I've welcomed our support for their project this coming year, and also we'll be partnering with Aula on that if it moves forward. Also, if folks haven't done so yet, please feel free to check out our Fillmore Nature Preserve. That's in Sempronius and Summerhill. We will also be considering future land acquisitions in partnership with the Nature Conservancy. There'll be one on the docket for this coming year, and we look forward to a presentation from them about the nature of those land transfers. Thanks to Michelle for spotlighting our grand opening of the Fillmore Nature Preserve within the newsletter, and I think maybe on the blog also. So thanks so much for that. And Anne mentioned we have the collaboration with Aula for an educational booth at the Cayuga Community College craft fair. And thanks to our director, Jenny Kent from the city, who will be giving that booth. That's December 7th and 8th. And that's really it. I look forward to presenting at the Bob Brower Symposium. And thanks to Anne for coordinating that effort. And of course, that'll be upcoming in the spring. So thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks.
Happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Aaron. I mean, Adam. I almost called you, I called you Aaron. I almost called you something else also.
Just don't call me late for dinner. I'm happy.
Okay, sounds good. Don't know what I'm eating for dinner tonight, so. Partners for Healthy Watersheds. Greg, do you have anything for us?
Yep, just real quick, the 2 meetings that we had, one in Auburn, one in Ovid. Thanks again to Seth and Dan and Doug. They went well. I didn't go to the one in Ovid, but I heard that one went well. A lot of it was just on what water quality updates from Tony. Dr. Kim Schultz is sick, so she wasn't able to make a presentation, which kind of stinks, but.
Did she go to the Ovid one?
Yeah. And I think maybe recordings might be available. I'm not
working on getting recordings.
Okay.
I think Tony's mostly done, and Kim was gonna do I think, yeah, kind of something in her office that would be available. Little technical glitches.
She always has wonderful presentations.
Hold on a second. I gotta close the meeting.
Roxy, you're unmuted all of a sudden. Okay, bye.
She's out.
Works well.
So it's just based on what farms and municipalities do to help protect the watersheds, just different points of view and different ends of the spectrum, which is kind of cool from field to faucet.
There you go. I like it.
How's that for the headline? Starting to talk about another forum based on some of the feedback that we got and questions on the first two. So stay tuned for that. That's about it. Farms are just starting to work on next year's schedules and plans and that type of thing. That's about it.
Thank you. See, Grant? Okay. I think we're all set here.
Motion to adjourn.
I just have one
Oh,
thing.
I thought you passed, so.
I did, but we still have a couple minutes.
Okay, Seth,
And
continue.
This has nothing to do with work, but I'm a scout leader for Troop 11 in Auburn, and I have 4 scouts that are gonna make the Life Scout rank in the next week. So they will be working on Eagle projects, and I just wanted to collectively ask the group if you guys have any ideas that might be an interesting Eagle project for them to work on or consider. Send me an email if you have any ideas.
10 years of sampling on every tributary in Cayuga
It needs
Lake.
to be, it has to be something they could complete within a year.
I mean, it's a lifetime achievement type of deal, right? So
Yeah.
give them a lifetime of work.
So it would be something that they would have, a project they would have to complete within about a year, potentially do some fundraising, work with the troop or with the community. And it needs to be a lasting project for community benefit. So
Okay.
it can be pretty open-ended.
Sounds cool.
Sorry.
You're right. Okay, motion second.
You got it.
All in favor?
Aye.
No one's opposed. We know that.
Give me your email.
I need a gavel. Meeting adjourned.
Make sure Emily's.
Thanks everyone online. Have a good day.